To the Right Honourable Michael Gove, this is an open letter, recipients undisclosed, composed by the disposed of who are troubled by what you propose and who've recently been wondering if there's been a misunderstanding, if perhaps you weren't expecting as a politician there to be children at the brunt of your every decision. And so we ask, but with trepidation, what experience do you actually have in education? Because you announced what it is you would like to see, not a generation of young people who can achieve or even begin to believe that they can, and that jobs and homes of their own aren't just dreams. No, you have a vision of a generation who understand how it feels to fail, sitting exams but to no avail unless, of course, to add a detail, they live in Wales, where they need a lower mark to pass, like a farce written for Amdram Performing Arts, where old farts make up lines as they go along, not listening to anybody else because they must be wrong. But seriously, let me ask, are you saying they can't pass without a lower mark than everybody else? That they can't write English because they're Welsh? Perhaps an independent intervention and pass mark revision was not the best decision, and any derision aimed at teachers for grade inflation surely belongs with the system where grade boundaries are set after the examination. So any grade inflation is a statistical construction, a governmental creation to fool the nation that improvement is consistent in education. But you vow to curtail the threat of grade inflation and pave the way for your vision, a revision of the unfit for purpose and frankly quite worthless GCSEs, which you believe are too easy to truly challenge the majority, and that higher scores, as in raw, awarded to our students are simply over-generous and need reviewing, which is essentially synonymous with teachers are cheating. So when we do better, it's because the exams are easier, but when Usain Bolt breaks a record, it's because he's faster, not because they made the racing track shorter. But, hence, as a cheat, let me commence in a rational defence of a well-known offence and state there's no moral sense in this pretense of an argument that the influence of early entry is derogatory to pupil attainment, arguing that it's damaging without understanding its effect on individuals, like schools don't want their kids to reach their potential, grow up successful, powerful, intellectual, that they'd enter them if it made them perform less well. It would hardly be a theft to compel Ofsted, the school's badly led with early entry widespread. The kids could pass, but we want them to fail instead. No, is this only entirely obvious if you're a department head? Early entry is a success story, a way to grasp a C early for all those kids who might otherwise be lost in the midst of 11 GCSEs, and contrary to your statement that it caps what they can achieve, it instills faith and motivation and belief in what they can be, but somehow you perceive it's a cheat if it's a resit dream, and yet you state they should keep trying to pass once they're post-16? Is it just me, or does this policy feel full of hypocrisy and idiocy from one who's supposed to be an education secretary, arguing that early entry fails the most able by refusing to mark their achievements in the performance tables is like asking the opinions of 100 academics, not liking their responses, so rubbishing all of it because, of course, they must be mad, despite all of the experience they've had, and not agreeing with you, I quote, makes them bad. Well, what I think is bad is the use of the Sunday Telegraph as a launching pad for a policy change with a cacophonous aftermath. It doesn't make any sense to me delivering changes to performance measures on a Sunday without even the courtesy of a DFE tweet until the Monday, followed by a series of amendments trying to add some sense to this whimsied announcement designed to dampen the extent of any improvement achieved by early entry attainment, forcing schools to choose between the interests of their students and their overall perceived performance as if, of course, there is a difference. It was a decision so clinical it's barely believable, and then you have the audacity to call teachers cynical? So yes, I'm critical of this typical politicisation of education, not that you will listen, because I haven't stuck to a classic metre. I've avoided quatrains and cinquains and iambic pentameter, and so in your view these words could only ever be amateur, limited by their modernist structure, but language is freer than that. It's forever changing, with the words that we use and choose constantly rearranging, and so when at Key Stage 2 you start implementing tests that attest to tackle the threat of an illiterate nation, I will, if I may, make a suggestion. It helps to double check for errors in the question and to avoid contention, taking into consideration that the Oxford comma isn't actually incorrect and can offer clarity in a variety of texts that are complex and might otherwise perplex the reader if a comma isn't usefully used. But what am I trying to prove to you, the guru? I can't teach you anything you don't know, because this isn't education. It's education according to Gove, which is a national curriculum where children learn volumes verbatim, like going backwards in the space-time continuum, because being able to recite despite a lack of insight does not increase one's capacity for social mobility. It just enables them to recite shite poetry at unfashionable parties, like a pub quiz master on a bender, a cover song pretender. You surely have to surrender. It's about as useful as your free school agenda. And while we're talking policy ideology, let's recap with some honesty the atrocity that's your legacy, not to mention your understanding of classroom pedagogy, attacking history like some QTS-less wannabe whose credibility is shrinking even faster than our economy. And so, without chronology, for a stanza Snapchat of the impact of this current chapter where you've been education's influential benefactor, let's go back again to 2010 and introduce the coalition set on a mission to re-envision the tradition where children spend every day in revision for examinations that slowly break them through attrition, even though they're only 7. A government who demote the arts and technology to the bottom of the Progress 8 education hierarchy that academic after academic has said will only create disparity between those in poverty and those in prosperity, and the irony, PP money being inflated to narrow the gap that you'll have created, as well as the irony of a national curriculum not taught to half the population because your free schools and academies don't have to follow them. It must disappoint you not to have absolute autonomy to reform the entire nation's teaching pedagogy as if that's the role of the government secretary, like Jeremy Hunt thinking he should tell gynaecologists how to examine a woman, or Damien Green attending crime scenes to tell police officers how to use handcuffs. We've simply had enough of this stuff. If you were Minister for Communities and Local Government, who knows, perhaps you'd go and see some firemen and teach them how to hold their hose. But you're the Education Secretary, one who dismisses his critics as enemies of progress when they dare to protest, or simply cut them dead with a casual yada yada, as eloquent as intelligent as Baldrick in Blackadder. Yet you focused on grammar. Well, you might just be right here, but your efforts are fruitless because of the useless implementation of what could have been genius. You see, simply creating a list of terms that kids need to master doesn't create a happily ever after for writing and accuracy if there's no quality in the provision of CPD for already tired out, pay-frozen primary teachers. It's a tragedy that what could have been your unrivalled victory got lost in the fantasy that expertise in grammar somehow appears magically. Forgive me for speaking so candidly, but what have you actually achieved since being anointed? Disillusionment, and a report card that reads, "We're very disappointed." Because we are. Under each angry tweet and retweet are the dreams of teachers beneath your feet, leaders and believers who just wanted to be teachers. Just teachers, not beat poem tweeters, not cynical, critical, political, lyrical divas. Teachers. Perhaps one day we'll find a common ground where you can meet us. But until then, to conclude, one could suggest that when the focus is on progress and schools are in regress, it's time to re-evaluate your self-perceived success and wonder perhaps if you had an Ofsted, what they'd make of you as a department head, whether your leadership is highly ambitious for pupils leading to the success of all individuals, and your policies underpinned by outstanding practice, not game playing and undermining tactics. Would they write to your delight that you develop teachers, that they thrive, come alive because of you as a leader? Unless your self-evaluation is lacking, I fear you may have to concede here that if this was an examination, you'd be on the foundation tier. But, as you know, inadequate professionals are hard to remove. So for now, yours sincerely, this is your notice to improve.